The morning sun crept over the rooftops of the small town as Sofia Alvarez walked down the dusty road toward her father's garage. The air smelled of oil and warm metal. Sofia carried her school backpack in one hand and a small lunch bag in the other. She felt a familiar warmth in her chest as she looked at the faded red sign above the garage door. Alvarez & Son, Auto Repair. Inside, her father, Miguel, already had his sleeves rolled up. He was leaning over the hood of a white pickup, wiping his hands on a rag. His face lit up when he saw her. "Good morning, Princessa," he called softly. Sofia smiled and set her things down on a nearby bench. She loved watching her father at work. He treated every car as if it were a friend. He taught her to listen to engines, to hear their patterns, and to know when a loose bolt would turn into trouble. When she was little, he let her hand him simple tools. Now, at 16, she helped him tune engines after school. It was not just a job, but a shared passion. The garage was a hive of motion. Old license plates from across the state lined one wall. Shelves held cans of spray paint, boxes of spark plugs, and long belts of timing chains. Faded American flag hung overhead, swaying slightly in the breeze from a ceiling fan. 4 mechanics worked at different stations, each absorbed in a task. They looked up as Sofia and her father passed by. She waved at them shyly. They waved back, half smiling. She was known around the garage, but people sometimes forgot she was a mechanic's daughter, and sometimes she liked that. Her father gave a nod as they walked past. "Can you hand me the wrench over there?" he asked, pointing to a bench. Sofia bent and picked up the wrench, wiping it clean on her jeans before handing it to him. She passed it carefully, making sure not to drop it among the spilled oil stains that seemed to decorate every inch of the floor. She liked the small dance of tool passing. It made her feel connected to her father's world. Just then, the large overhead door clattered open. In drove Mr. Thornton, the owner of the garage. He was a tall man with a lean build and silver hair that gleamed in the sunlight. People often said he had more wrinkles than any man his age should carry. His eyes were sharp and observant. He scanned the room like a hawk, noticing every detail. He wore a black jacket over a dirty white shirt and carried a battered toolbox in his hand. "Morning all," he said, his voice deep and steady. The mechanic straightened up. Mr. Thornton rarely spoke more than he needed to, but everyone listened when he did. He walked over to a covered object in the back of the garage. 2 mechanics flanked the heavy tarp. They lifted it slowly, revealing a rusty old engine sitting on a steel stand. The metal was pitted, and wires dangled like vines in a jungle. No one had dared touch it for months. Mr. Thornton turned his gaze toward his crew, including Sofia. "This engine came in from the Johnson farm," he said calmly. "It's a prototype from the old Patterson plant. No one here has been able to start it or even get it to turn over. Senior mechanics have tried. They've failed." His words settled like a stone in the pit of Sofia's stomach. Engines she could handle. Rust and decay worried her, but she believed she could solve any puzzle. Yet this one carried a reputation. He leaned closer to Sofia and lowered his voice, just loud enough for her to hear. "How about you fix it by the end of the day?" His eyebrow lifted. The entire garage went quiet. Sofia blinked in surprise. She felt the eyes of every mechanic falling on her. Her father, standing nearby, looked at her with a mixture of pride and concern. Sofia forced a calm expression. The mechanics started to laugh. A deep, surprised guffaw from Jeff, a tall man with grease on his fingernails, echoed around the garage. "You kid, you'll be lucky to make it sputter," he teased. Others joined. In feeling bold under Mr. Thornton's watchful glare, Sofia's cheeks heated. She saw Mr. Thornton's face remain unreadable. Sofia took a steady breath. She knew her father's teachings had prepared her for tough tasks. She reminded herself of evenings spent studying engine diagrams under a single lamp, of afternoons replacing spark plugs until her hands trembled with exhaustion. She remembered her own success the week before, when she had fixed a soldier's motorcycle that had sat broken in the garage for 3 months. She had brought it to life on a rainy afternoon, and the soldier had saluted her, whispering thanks as he rode away. She looked at the old engine. The metal casing was scarred. Thick layer of dust covered its cylinders. The fuel injector looked unlike any she had seen. The camshaft still turned, but it clicked roughly. She could see the challenge in its parts: worn valves, corroded pipes, and a missing bracket where one should have been. Few could imagine how it worked. She met Mr. Thornton's gaze. "I'll do it," she said, her voice steady. The laughter died instantly. Sophia felt a pulse of fear. The mechanic stared at her. Her father's eyes softened, but he did not speak. Mr. Thornton's lips curved into a half-smile. "Very well," he said, stepping back. "You have until 5 o'clock. If it doesn't run by then, we call it impossible." He turned on his heel and walked out, leaving the engine and the tarp stand as the center of attention. The overhead door clanged shut behind him. Silence reigned for a moment as everyone processed what had just happened. Then Sophia heard Jeff mutter, "This'll be good." Her heart raced. Sophia knelt beside the engine and rested her palms on the cold metal. She felt a spark of excitement. She touched the wires as if greeting an old friend. Slowly, other mechanics drifted closer, curious but still skeptical. Sophia wanted to show them respect. She nodded to them. "Help me move it to my station," she said softly. Together they rolled the engine toward a clear corner of the garage. Sophia wiped away layers of dust with a clean rag, revealing faint traces of green paint beneath the rust. She shone a flashlight into the cylinder head, studying its shape. She traced her finger across the gear train and noticed a faint misalignment in one of the small cogs. Her heart skipped. That could explain why the engine would not turn smoothly, but she held back. She knew surprises were more satisfying when earned. She set the rag aside and reached for her notebook. She sketched the engine's main parts, labeling the valves, injectors, and gears. She wrote down her first impressions: corroded valves, loose piston rings, damaged wiring. She planned to order replacement terminals later, but first she needed to understand how the engine was supposed to work. Sophia closed her eyes for a moment and pictured the engine's heartbeat. She imagined how fuel traveled through the injector, how the camshaft opened and closed valves, how the spark plug ignited the mixture. She felt as if she could hear a faint click beneath the metal. She opened her eyes. Everyone around her watched. With growing interest, her father appeared at her side, holding a screwdriver. He did not speak. He knew better than to second-guess her now. Sophia gave him a small smile. "Thanks," she said. He nodded and handed her the screwdriver. Sophia began to unscrew the casing. Metal dust drifted in little clouds, she hummed, softly to calm herself. With each turn of the screwdriver, she came closer to the engine's hidden secrets. The clock on the wall ticked. Each tick reminded her of the time she had until 5 o'clock. But the work made her forget the time. She loved moments like this, when the world narrowed to the hum of tools and the gentle pulse of metal. Her fingers worked carefully, loosening bolts and lifting covers. She wiped grease from her brow. She felt strong, capable, and alive. Mechanics watched in silence, no longer laughing. They whispered among themselves. Sophia sensed their doubt, turning to respect. Maybe she could do it. Maybe she really would start the impossible engine. She felt her pulse steady as she looked at the engine's open heart. And in that moment, she knew that she would not let this engine win. She would bring life to its rusted parts and show everyone, which she already knew, that nothing was impossible if you looked closely enough. Sophia wiped the sweat from her brow and studied the engine's open heart. She touched the metal casing gently, as if greeting an old friend. Every bolt and wire seemed to whisper its own secret. She knelt beside the engine stand and reached for a small brush. Carefully, she swept away the thick layer of dust that hid the engine's true form. As she worked, her mind replayed her father's lessons about looking for hidden clues. He had always said that every engine spoke in its own language. Sophia wanted to become fluent. She picked up a flashlight and shone it into the cylinder head. She saw patterns of wear on the valves that told a story of long, hard work. The valves were pitted and stuck, unable to open and close smoothly. Sophia made a note in her little notebook: valves need cleaning or replacement. She flipped to a fresh page and sketched the valve train, drawing each component in simple detail. Her pencil moved over the paper with confidence. She felt a familiar thrill, the joy of discovery. Next, Sophia turned her attention to the wiring. Frayed cables dangled from the sides of the engine. She traced a wire with her finger from the spark plug connector down to a corroded terminal. She could see brown rust eating away at the metal. That would stop the spark. She set aside the flashlight and picked up a wire brush. Brushing gently, she cleaned the terminal until the metal shone. Sparks of excitement danced in her eyes. Twisted a fresh compression sleeve onto the wire and crimped it tight. When she tugged gently, the wire held firm. A mechanic named Paul hovered nearby, curious but cautious, cleared his throat. "You really think you can fix this thing?" he asked quietly. Sophia looked up and met his gaze. She offered him a small smile. "Every engine can run again," she said softly. Paul nodded, stepping back. He handed her a digital tablet. "I found the blueprints online," he said. "Thought you might want them." Sophia's heart leaped. She tapped through the pages, matching the drawings to the engine in front of her. The blueprint showed a small support bracket missing in the lower gear assembly. That was the piece nobody had noticed. She studied the gear train. One of the small cogs sat slightly askew, its teeth not lining up perfectly with the others. That little misalignment could make the whole engine grind to a stop. She traced each tooth with her fingertip. It was the culprit. Now she knew what to do. But the missing bracket posed another problem. She needed to fashion a new one. She reached for her father's old metalworking tools, a small hacksaw, a file, and a piece of sheet steel. She measured the gap where the bracket should fit and drew its dimensions in her notebook. For the next hour, Sophia worked at a small metal bending station. She sawed a piece of steel, filing the edges smooth. Her fingers grew sore, but she ignored the ache. She felt alive. The metal bit under her file, shaping itself to her will. She bent the piece into the exact shape she needed and drilled 2 tiny holes for mounting bolts. She held it up against the engine stand. It fit perfectly. Grinned, her chest swelling with pride. She wrapped the bracket in a clean rag and carried it back to the engine. By now, the afternoon light had waned. The garage felt cooler as the sun dipped behind distant hills. Other mechanics had drifted back to their work, but a quiet buzz of excitement lingered. Sophia set the new bracket into place, bolting it tightly to the engine block. She applied a dab of grease to the gear train and gently wiggled the cogs. They meshed smoothly, the misalignment gone. She closed her eyes and inhaled the warm smell of metal and oil. It was the smell of possibility. She moved to the fuel injector. It looked odd, unlike any injector she had seen. She removed it with a quiet click and placed it on a clean towel. She disassembled it, cleaning each tiny component with a soft cloth and solvent. The injector's tiny needle had stuck in its seat, blocking the fuel flow. She lubricated it and tested its movement. The needle slid freely now. She reassembled the injector and reconnected it to the fuel line. Sophia's hands moved with surety. She was in her element. With the major parts repaired, she turned to the spark plugs. Each plug showed signs of heavy use, black soot and melted electrodes. She cleaned 2 of them, but 2 were too worn and needed replacement. She found fresh spark plugs in a drawer and fitted them one by one. She tightened them just enough to seal the chamber. She checked her notes. Valves cleaned, bracket fabricated, wiring terminals reattached, injector fixed, spark plugs replaced. She felt ready for the final reassembly. Slowly, Sophia reattached the engine casing. I see. She aligned the panels and tightened every bolt with her torque wrench, listening for the satisfying click that meant it was just right. She reconnected the wiring harness, making sure each plug fits snugly. She adjusted the timing belt and set the tension. Her father appeared beside her, carrying a small can of fresh engine oil. He poured it into the crankcase, watching her work. He said nothing, only offered a proud nod. Sophia wiped her hands and stepped back. The engine now looked almost new, despite its years of neglect. She raised the tarp that covered the workbench and moved the engine to the center of the garage. Mechanics gathered around, their faces a mix of curiosity and respect. Sophia climbed onto a small step stool and refilled the fuel tank. She attached a temporary fuel line and flicked the ignition switch. The engine sputtered once, twice, then burst into a steady roar. A hush fell over the garage as the engine idled. Sophia smiled, her heart pounding with triumph. She had found the hidden misalignment, fabricated the missing part, and brought the impossible engine back to life. She felt a warm glow of satisfaction. Around her, the mechanics broke into applause. Mr. Thornton stepped forward, his face unreadable. At first, then he allowed himself a small, genuine smile. "Well done," he said. Sophia's father clapped her on the back, pride shining in his eyes. Sophia turned off the engine and climbed down. She wiped her hands with a rag and looked at the crew. "Thank you all for your help," she said simply. The men nodded, still grinning. For a moment, the garage felt like a family united by the power of machines and the spark of one determined girl. Sophia packed away her tools, her notebook filled with notes and sketches. She had faced the challenge and won. And she knew that this was only the beginning of her journey with engines and the secrets they held. Sophia wiped her palms on a rag and stepped back to where the other mechanics stood in a loose half-circle. The late afternoon light slanted through the garage's high windows and made dust motes dance around her. The engine sat on its stand, like a silent beast, its metal casing gleaming where she had polished away rust. She felt a flutter in her chest as she thought of the moment to come. Every second had led to this. Every sketch, every careful turn of a wrench, every spark plug she cleaned, all of it built to this instant. She reached for the ignition key, a simple metal piece on a small chain. The key felt cool and heavy in her hand. Her father and Mr. Thornton stood on either side of the workshop floor, both watching her closely. The other mechanics leaned forward, faces serious now instead of teasing. Slowly, Sophia inserted the key into the ignition slot. The garage went quiet, even the distant hum of traffic outside seemed to pause. She turned the key until there was a click. The engine did not move. Her heart sank. For a fleeting moment, she wondered if she had missed something, if her careful work had been enough. She exhaled gently and reminded herself that every new start sounded rough. She turned the key a little more and pressed the choke lever. Soft click came from the injector. She held her breath. The engine wheezed once, like a great animal waking from sleep, then it coughed, and for a second it paused. Sophia's hands trembled. She barely noticed. She glanced at her father. His face was calm, encouraging. She gave a small nod to herself. She turned the key again. The engine coughed twice more, then roared to life on the third try. The sound rolled through the garage like thunder in a small valley. A steady, powerful hum filled the air. No one moved for a moment. Then the sound of clapping broke the spell. One mechanic slapped his hand against an oil-stained workbench. Another stomped his foot. Soon the entire crew cheered. Sophia stepped back as the engine's steady growl filled the space. She could feel the vibration beneath her boots. Her chest burned with pride and relief. She closed her eyes and allowed herself a quick smile. Mr. Thornton stepped forward. He walked around the engine, listening to its rhythm. He reached out, placed a hand on the casing, and felt the warmth. He cleared his throat. His voice sounded different, softer, surprised. "It runs," he said simply. Sophia opened her eyes and looked at him. He met her gaze for a moment, and she saw a spark of approval behind his usual reserve. The engine's hum filled the space between them. Sophia knelt beside it and placed a hand on the steel stand. She felt proud that she had coaxed life from this old prototype. She leaned closer and examined the gears through an access port. They moved smoothly, the new bracket she had made holding the assembly firm. She listened to the valves snap open and closed in a perfect rhythm. Her work was sound. Mr. Thornton nodded to his mechanics. "Let's test it under load," he said. He stepped back and motioned to Jeff, the tall mechanic who had joked earlier. Jeff hurried to grab a heavy flywheel and clutch assembly from a nearby bench. He positioned it against the engine's output shaft and bolted it on. A hush fell again. Now they would see if the engine could do real work. Once the clutch was in place, Sophia refilled the small fuel tank she had attached for testing. She checked the oil level and tightened the cap. Mr. Thornton handed her a pair of safety gloves. She slid them on, feeling the cool leather between her fingers. She crouched and twisted the ignition key once more. The engine roared back to life. Sophia raised her head and looked at the clutch assembly. She gently nudged a lever that engaged the flywheel. The shaft turned, dragging the heavy wheel in a slow but steady motion. The flywheel spun without a hitch. The metal whirred under load, and steam rose from a small patch on the casing where she had applied sealant. Sophia watched carefully for any wobble or odd sound. None came. The engine purred. She relaxed her shoulders and straightened up. The mechanics exchanged looks of amazement. One whispered, "She did it." Sophia turned the key off, silencing the engine. A steady drip of oil from a test port went unnoticed. All eyes were on her. She unclipped her gloves and wiped them on her jeans. She looked at Mr. Thornton. He tucked his hands behind his back. Head tilted slightly. He seemed to be weighing something. Then he spoke. "You taught me that every engine has a heartbeat," Sophia said softly, surprising herself. "I just had to learn to listen." Her father's eyes brightened. Mr. Thornton's lips twitched in what might have been the beginning of a smile. Sophia knelt and wiped a stray drop of oil from the engine's side. She pointed to the gear bracket she had made. "This was the key," she said. "Once the gears meshed correctly, everything else flowed." She tapped the casing lightly, then cleaning the injector and replacing the plugs, brought back the spark. Mr. Thornton nodded and turned to the crew. "She's right," he said. "I set her the hardest challenge because I wanted to know who could handle it." Sophia did more than handle it, she mastered it. The mechanics nodded, some stepping forward to pat her on the back or shake her hand. Sophia felt their respect wash over her like warm sunlight. Jeff came over and handed her a rag. "You earned this," he said with a grin. "Give my congratulations to your old man. I'll never doubt you again." Sophia laughed softly and accepted the rag. She cleaned off remaining oil from her fingers. Her hands felt sticky, but she didn't care. The grime was the badge of her effort. Her father came to her side and wrapped an arm around her shoulders. He squeezed gently. "So proud," he whispered. Sophia rested her head against his shoulder. Heat sprang to her eyes. Pride and gratitude mingled inside her. She thought of all the evenings spent with him, studying diagrams under a single lamp, of being patient when engines refused to start, of learning to trust her instincts. Mr. Thornton cleared his throat again. "Sophia Alvarez," he said, his voice firm, "you are now head of the restoration project." Sophia looked up, startled. Mechanics around her exchanged excited looks. Head of the restoration project meant she would lead a team next month to rebuild a collection of antique engines for the State Museum. It was a chance she had only dreamed of. Tears prickled at the corners of her eyes. She swallowed and managed to smile. "Thank you," she said. "I won't let you down." Her voice cracked slightly but held steady. Mr. Thornton offered his hand. Sophia took it and felt the firm grip of respect. The engine stood between them, now a symbol of her talent. The garage seemed smaller, cozier, filled with the scent of oil and warm metal. Outside, the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in streaks of orange and pink. Inside, the bright overhead lights glowed as mechanics wheeled tools back to their stations. Sophia's father patted her back. Then he nodded at the engine. "Let's clean up and wheel it out," he said. "You earned a good look on Main Street." He winked at her. Sophia laughed, the sound bright and free. She knelt one last time beside the engine and ran her hand along the casing. She felt a rush of promise for the future. As they lifted the engine from its stand, mechanics helping each side, Sophia thought about the day's journey. A simple dare had become a turning point in her life. She had faced doubt, studied every detail, created a new part, and brought a forgotten machine back to life. The garage had grown quiet around her victory, but her heart buzzed with excitement. She glanced at her father, whose face shone with pride. She looked at Mr. Thornton, whose stiff posture had softened into genuine warmth. She felt the respect of her peers all around, and in that moment, Sophia knew she had earned her place in this world of metal, machines, and the quiet song of engines that only she could hear. Sophia felt a gentle buzz of excitement as she walked down the oil-stained floor of the garage. Following her father and Mr. Thornton, the restored engine lay on a wooden cart, its polished metal gleaming under the bright lights. The mechanics trailed behind in respectful silence. Sophia's heart thumped in her chest. She had proven herself once already today, but part of her wondered what came next. What would her boss say? What would her peers think now that they saw her skills in action? Mr. Thornton halted beside a long workbench. He placed a hand on the engine's smooth casing. "Sophia," he began, his voice calm and steady, "you showed us something today." He looked at her directly, those sharp eyes softening. "You have a rare gift for understanding these machines. But more than that, you have patience and creativity. You saw beyond what was broken and imagined what could be." Sophia swallowed. She felt her cheeks warm. She glanced at her father, Miguel, who nodded slowly, pride shining in his eyes. Then Mr. Thornton continued, "I want you to tell everyone what you found and how you fixed it. I want you to lead a short presentation tomorrow morning. Show us how you approached the problem." Sophia blinked. "Give a presentation?" She had never stood in front of the team as the expert. Her voice caught for a moment, but she steadied herself. "Yes, sir," she said softly. Mr. Thornton turned to the crew. "This engine sat here for months. It defeated every senior mechanic who tried. Yet Sophia took less time than any of us would have aimed. She succeeded. Tomorrow at 9, we will gather here and learn from her." A murmur ran through the group. Some exchanged surprised glances. Others offered her encouraging smiles. Sophia nodded, feeling a mix of pride and nervousness. She had earned their respect, but now she had to teach them. As the mechanics began to clear tools and sweep floors, Sophia's father guided her to a small office at the back of the garage. It was a quiet space, with a wooden desk, a single lamp, and shelves of dusty repair manuals. Miguel placed a hand on her shoulder. "You did well," he said quietly. "Tomorrow, just speak from the heart. Show them how you think." Sophia took a deep breath. "I will," she replied. Back on the shop floor, Sophia gathered her notes and sketches. She spread them out on the bench, the initial diagrams of the valve train, the blueprint of the missing bracket, photos she had snapped on her phone showing the corroded injector and the old spark plugs, arranged them in order like pages of a book. She knew her explanation had to be simple and clear. She needed to show the team where to look and why each step mattered. She reviewed her plan. First, describe the valve issue and how she cleaned and lubricated them. Second, explain the wiring repair and terminal replacement. Third, show the fabricated bracket and its role in aligning the gears. Fourth, detail the injector cleaning and plug replacement. And finally, demonstrate the reassembly and test. Practiced each section aloud, imagining the faces of her colleagues. At first, her voice quivered, but with each run-through it grew firmer. Meanwhile, Mr. Thornton walked among the mechanics, assigning cleanup tasks. He paused by Jeff, who was carrying away a pile of old engine parts. "You did well today," Mr. Thornton told him quietly. "Help Sophia tomorrow. She may need a hand with the demonstration." Jeff grinned and nodded. He seemed sincere. Sophia felt grateful, his earlier teasing forgotten, replaced by genuine support. By early evening, the garage was nearly empty. Sophia packed her drawings into her backpack, her muscles tired but her mind alert. Her father switched off the lights, and they exited together. The night air felt cool against Sophia's warm cheeks. She and her father walked home, talking quietly about tomorrow. She felt ready. She felt proud. Yet a small flutter of nerves remained, nothing she couldn't handle. The next morning, Sophia arrived at the garage early. The sun was just rising, casting a golden glow on the worn concrete. She switched on the overhead lights and set up a small folding table in front of the engine. She arranged her sketches in neat stacks and placed her phone beside them to show photos. As the other mechanics filed in, some rubbing sleep from there, she offered them warm smiles. They greeted her with nods and greetings. A few patted her on the back. At 9 sharp, Mr. Thornton stood beside her. He tapped the table lightly. He said, "Today, Sophia will teach us how." She fixed the impossible engine. Sophia felt the buzz of attention. She straightened her shoulders and stepped forward. Her voice rang clear as she began. "Good morning," she said, her tone steady. "I want to start by showing why this engine would not turn over." She held up a sketch of the valve train. The valves here were pitted and stuck. They could not open and close smoothly, so the engine could not breathe. I cleaned each valve seat with a wire brush, applied lubricant, and tested their movement until they worked freely. She passed the sketch around. Some mechanics leaned. And to inspect it, Sophia felt their interest deepen. She moved to the bench and lifted a small part of the engine casing, revealing the valve train beneath. "Watch how the valves move now," she said. She gently pressed a lever to simulate the camshaft motion. The valves snapped open and closed without delay. A murmur of approval ran through the group. Sophia smiled. Next, she continued. The wiring. She held up a photograph of the corroded terminal. This connection was covered in rust. It blocked the spark. I cleaned it, replaced the terminal, and crimped a fresh compression sleeve. She demonstrated on a spare wire. Harness. The clean terminal glowed under the light. A good connection is vital for the spark plug to fire. She paused and scanned the room. The mechanics watched her with keen eyes. Even Mr. Thornton seemed attentive. Sophia felt a surge of confidence. "Now, the real key," she said, pulling out the metal bracket she had made. The brass-colored piece gleamed in the lamp's glow. The gear train here was misaligned by less than a millimeter. But that small error stopped everything. I measured the gap, cut the steel bracket, and aligned the gears correctly. Once they meshed smoothly, the engine could turn. The bracket next to the engine and pointed to where it fit. The others nodded, impressed by the precision. She moved on to the injector. This fuel injector had a stuck needle. I disassembled it, cleaned each part, and lubricated the needle. Seat. A clean injector sprays fuel evenly, which is crucial for combustion. She held up the injector and clicked the needle. It moved freely now. A smooth spray means the engine can burn fuel properly. Finally, Sophia held a fresh spark plug. Old, worn plugs can misfire or fail to ignite the mixture. I replaced 2 that were too damaged. She installed a new plug in a spare cylinder head and tightened it just right. Proper torque ensures a tight seal. To finish, Sophia reassembled a small test engine block on the bench. She walked through each reconnection step quickly, but clearly. Then she smiled. "And that's how I brought this engine back to life." She looked at Mr. Thornton and he nodded. The room was quiet for a heartbeat. Then applause broke out. Mechanics patted Sophia on the back and offered congratulations. Mr. Thornton stepped forward. "Thank you, Sophia," he said to her. Voice held genuine warmth. "Your explanation was clear and thorough. You have taught us well." He turned to the group. "Let's take what we learned today and apply it. Every engine has a story. We must listen." As the mechanics dispersed to their stations, Sophia's father came to her side. He wrapped an arm around her shoulders. "You did amazing," he whispered. Sophia felt tears of happiness prick her eyes. She nodded, unable to speak for a moment. Then she whispered back, "Thank you for everything." All around her, the garage hummed with renewed energy. Engines idled smoothly on their stands, and wheels turned in test bays. Sophia looked at the engine she had restored. It sat shining and strong, a symbol of her skill and determination. She felt a deep sense of belonging. She belonged here among these mechanics and machines, where her hands and her heart could work together to breathe life into metal. Tomorrow, she knew, new challenges would come. But today, she had shared her knowledge and earned respect. She had turned a dare into a lesson for all. And she had shown that passion, patience, and creativity could make the impossible possible. Sophia woke before dawn on the day the restored engine was to leave the garage. Light from a half-moon slanted through her bedroom window. She lay still for a moment, listening to the quiet hum of life waking up in her small town. Today felt different. Today she would see her hard work travel beyond the dusty floors of Alvarez and Son Auto Repair and become part of something bigger. She dressed in her usual coveralls, tying her long hair back in a neat braid. She paused by the mirror and straightened the collar of her work shirt. Her eyes met her reflection, and for a second, she saw the girl who once doubted herself. Now, she saw someone ready for the next step. Her father stood in the doorway, holding 2 steaming mugs of coffee. He handed her one and smiled. Sophia took a sip and breathed in the strong, warm aroma. "You'll do great today," he said quietly. She nodded, feeling a surge of gratitude. At the garage, the mechanics were already busy. Soft lights cut through the morning haze. Sophia and her father rolled the engine out on its wooden cart. It sat securely, polished to a bright sheen. The other mechanics stepped aside, giving them room. Jeff gave Sophia a thumbs up, and Paul held the door open. Outside, the sun was rising, painting the sky in soft pink and gold. They loaded the engine into a covered trailer hitched to a pickup truck. Sophia checked the straps and the padding, making sure each buckle was tight. Mr. Thornton arrived in his black pickup, nodding approval at their careful work. He handed Sophia the keys. "You drive," he said. "I'll follow." Sophia's heart beat faster as she climbed into the driver's seat. She turned the key, and the engine purred to life its first ride down the road. The gravel crunched under the wheels as they rolled out of the garage. Sophia shifted the pickup into gear and steered onto the main street. Storefronts yawned awake, shops unlocking their doors. Neighbors waved as they passed. Word had spread about the restored engine, and people gathered on the sidewalks to watch. Sophia felt a warm glow. She smiled and waved. The little convoy of 1 pickup with a trailer and 1 black truck headed toward the county museum, a long red brick building on the edge of town. As they drove, Sophia thought back to the day the engine first arrived. It looked like a forgotten relic, rusted and full of secrets. Today it looked like a triumph. She remembered how every bolt told a story, how each corroded part begged for a second chance. She thought of the moment the engine roared to life, and how the whole garage had fallen silent in wonder. She thought of the presentation she gave, and the pride her father and Mr. Thornton showed. She felt a new sense of purpose. They reached the museum's loading dock just as the sun cleared the roofline. Curators and volunteers stood ready. With a ramp and moving blankets, the main doors opened wide, revealing high ceilings and polished floors. Visitors would come later, but today, the staff had set aside a quiet hour for the engine's arrival. Sophia parked the pickup, cut the engine, and climbed down. She and her father guided the cart down the ramp, moving carefully so as not to scratch the engine's fresh finish. Inside the museum, the curators led them to a glass display platform in the main hall. The engine would sit there for months, a centerpiece of a new exhibit on local industry and invention. Museum guests would learn how a small-town mechanic's skill had brought an impossible engine back to life. Sophia felt honored. She wiped a speck of dust from the engine's side and stepped back. The curators thanked her and her father, offering them museum badges and invitations to the exhibit's opening ceremony next week. Outside, a small crowd of townspeople had gathered. A local news reporter held a microphone ready with a video camera. Sophia's cheeks warmed. She had not expected so much attention. Mr. Thornton stood beside her, looking pleased. He put his hand on her shoulder. "Go on," he said softly. "You'll do fine." The reporter called out to Sophia, "Miss Alvarez, can you tell us how it feels to bring this engine here today?" Sophia took a deep breath. She felt the eyes of the crowd and the camera lens on her. She thought of all the nights she spent studying, engine schematics of every oily fingertip and every click of a wrench. She thought of her father's steady guidance and Mr. Thornton's challenge. She thought of the mechanics who watched her and believed in her. Now she had to find words that matched her pride. She smiled, looked into the camera, and spoke in clear, simple language. "When I first saw this engine, I knew it had a story left to tell. It sat here silent for months, but I believed that with patience and a close look at each part, it would speak again. I cleaned its valves, fixed the wiring, made a new bracket, and gave it fresh spark plugs. And then I heard it roar. Bringing it here today shows me that hard work and teamwork can make the impossible real. I hope everyone who sees it feels inspired to look closely at the challenges they face and believe they can fix them. Reporter nodded, impressed. Thank you, Sophia. Congratulations. The cameraman backed away, filming Sophia as she walked into the museum to see the engine behind the glass for the first time. She pressed her palm to the cool barrier and smiled. Behind her, townspeople cheered softly. After the brief interview, Sophia's father led her outside to join Mr. Thornton and the crew. They placed a small plaque in front of the display, engraved with the engine's history and Sophia's name. The plaque read, "This prototype engine, restored by Sofia Alvarez in June 2025, stands as a tribute to skill, creativity, and care." Sofia ran her fingertips along the smooth edge of the plaque. Her name seemed both familiar and new. She felt a deep sense of pride and humility at once. Over the next hour, Sophia walked through the museum halls with her father and Mr. Thornton. They spoke quietly about the next restoration project, a collection of antique farm equipment in need of attention. Mr. Thornton asked Sophia if she would lead the team. She smiled widely and nodded. She felt ready for whatever came next. Back at the garage that afternoon, the mechanics greeted her warmly. Jeff handed her a fresh rag, and Paul offered her a cold soda. Sophia laughed and accepted them gratefully. She set down her bag and slumped into a chair, exhausted but happy. Her father poured her a cup of coffee and sat beside her. "I did it," he said. "You made us proud." Sophia leaned her head on his shoulder and closed her eyes. The garage smelled of oil and metal and possibility. That evening, Sophia sat in her bedroom with her notebook. She wrote down ideas for the next project, what tools she might need, what parts she should order, and which team members to invite. Her heart hummed with excitement. She thought about how she could teach others what she had learned. She sketched a plan for a small workshop she wanted to hold at school to teach basic engine care to her friends. Guide on reading engine sounds, so anyone could learn to listen. As she wrote, Sophia realized that her life had shifted that day. She was no longer just her father's helper. She was her own person, a skilled mechanic with new dreams. She felt gratitude for her family, her boss, her friends, and even for that rusty engine that dared her to try. It had shown her what was possible when someone refused to give up. The next morning, Sophia found a small envelope on her desk. Inside was a handwritten note from Mr. Thornton. "Thank you for proving that talent and heart know no age. Here's to many more engines and stories, JT." She smiled, her heart full. She folded the note carefully and placed it in her notebook. Then she stood, ready to face the day. Outside, the sun climbed higher, promising a bright future. Sophia stepped into the garage, tools in hand, ready for the next challenge. She had learned that every machine has a hidden story waiting to be heard, and she was the one who could bring it to life. With that thought warming her chest, she opened the door wide and let the day begin.